to my March book recap. Here are all my physical books that I read, and then I had 4 more Kindle books, so a total of 9 books this month. I'm at 31 books for the year. My goal was 75, so yeah, we'll hit that. So the first book I read this month was Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. This is book 2 in the Crimson Moth duology. The first book was Heartless Hunter. Loved Heartless Hunter, but did not love Crimson Moth. I gave it 2.5 stars. I go into full detail about everything I didn't like about this book and the things that I did in a different video where I make Marry Me Chicken. Go see that for like my full Rebel Witch thoughts and feelings, but we'll give a brief overview here. So basically, Rune, I'm rereading Hunger Games right now, not Rue, Rune. Rune is a witch and Gideon is a witch hunter, so naturally they like each other, but they hate each other because opposites. But, you know. So you see a bunch of their story in the first book, and then this is like a continuation of that. The first book left off on a crazy ending, so I don't want to say too much because I don't want to like spoil Rebel Witch if people haven't read it yet. Basically, it's like, you know, they hate each other, but they love each other. They have to decide if they want to work together to reach their goal. What I didn't like about this book is I felt like it was super predictable, and sometimes that's not a bad thing, but with this, I feel like that was like a really bad thing. Like, I just did not enjoy reading it. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and then I was correct. It felt like Rune wasn't acting like herself for most of the book, and I think that was intentional. I think the author did that on purpose, but it wasn't explained well enough. Like, there should have been more of an explanation as to why she was acting different and like what was going on in her head, instead of just having her make choices that like as a character she just never would have made. The end was like super rushed and unrealistic, and like, not that I wanted the book to go on any longer, but the ending just was so rushed. There was an epilogue, and the epilogue was good, but I just didn't care anymore at that point. So I like skimmed through it, and it like did answer some final questions, but I just couldn't care. Rough start to the month, 2.5 stars. Next, I read Iron Flame, because I had read Fourth Wing at the end of February, took a little break to read Rebel Witch, and then Iron Flame. I give it 3 stars. I loved Fourth Wing so much, and Iron Flame, that was not as good as Fourth Wing by any means. There's a quote, I think it's on, I read the book on Kindle, and I think this quote is on the back of like the physical book, but the quote is, it's from Xaden. It says, "The first year is when some of us lose our lives, the second year is when the rest of us lose our humanity." And I feel like that was a pretty good like description of the book, and kind of like an indicator as to what was to come, and like you don't even realize it until you like read the whole book and then read the quote. It did have a lot of trouble in the first half of the book, like trying to get into it. I couldn't find myself, like I didn't want to pick it up and read it. I just didn't really care. And then once I was reading it, I was enjoying it, and like I wanted to keep reading, but I just couldn't get myself to pick up the book. I just did not care. Also, I think one of the plot points that I think was supposed to be like a big like, oh my god, this is crazy, I kind of guessed it right in the beginning. Not the big ending, like, no, Rebecca Yarros does a really good job with her crazy like cliffhanger endings, but one of the other big like reveals of like, oh my god, we've been doing it wrong the whole book. I knew from the start that they were doing it wrong, so it was a little bit like anticlimactic when they revealed that. I think mostly Violet just like annoyed me a lot in this book, and I think that might be a hot take. I think people really like Violet, but she just, the whole book was so annoying to me. It was like, do I trust you? And then it was like, I think I trust you, but like you don't trust me, and just like the whole like the romance side of it, I was like, girl, like you're supposed to be like a badass. Like, why do we care what this man thinks? Maybe that's just me and my own feelings, but wasn't a big fan of how she was acting and like how much she was letting her love life dictate everything else that was going on around her. The ending was crazy though. Cliffhanger, that was wild. I was not expecting that. I don't think I like it though. I don't think I like that as like a story setup. Like when I finished the book, I was like, oh, well, I have to read Onyx Storm just to like see what's going on, you know? But like I didn't really like care about what happened next. Like I did a little bit, I guess, because I did read Onyx Storm. So since I didn't love Iron Flame, I wanted to take a little break, had a little palate cleanser before I read Onyx Storm, because I really wanted to like Onyx Storm. So I read If I Go Missing by Leslie Wolfe. This cover reminds me of the movie Dare. The book has nothing to do with that movie. So unrelated, but just the cover reminds me of that. I gave this 5 stars. This was, I think, my second 5-star of the year. So basically the main character is a teacher, and she's promoting these If I Go Missing binders that are basically just like binders that include all of your personal information. So like passwords to your accounts, banking information, like who your family are, who your friends are, and then just like anything like important that you would want police to know if you were to go missing. So like if someone had been following you or making you feel uncomfortable, or like you think that if something bad happens to you, it's going to be this person's fault, like a note to like maybe investigate them a bit. It's kind of like a place to put things that like are going on that are like maybe a little concerning, but not so concerning that you go to the police, was kind of what I was getting from it. So she gets to talk about this on TV, and it had like they talk about it as her and the principal, who is not a fan of her or of this binder, gets to talk about it at the school, and then literally the next day one of her students goes missing. Like one of her direct students goes missing. So at the same time that the student goes missing, her high school best friend moves in next door, except it was like the high school best friend that you kind of want to leave in high school, that like you look back on that friendship and you're like, wow, that kind of was like, glad that stayed in high school. And then this girl moves in next door with her husband. So you've got the missing student, you've got the best friend that we don't think she actually likes next door, and then you learn a bit about some third friend that they had in high school, but that who's not in the current story, and then something had happened and you don't know what. And so for a while it was like these three plots, and obviously like the friend living next door and the friend from high school, like you can see how there'd be a clear connection there, but then there's this girl missing, and then something else happens, and it's just like at one point there's like 3 different plot lines going on, and like you can assume that they'll all connect, but there was no way to even like guess, at least personally, how they were gonna connect. That was where it kind of started to like, it didn't start to lose me, but I was kind of like, I have like no clue what's going on. I feel like I'm reading 3 different stories right now. But then once I hit like the halfway mark, maybe a little bit less than halfway through, things just start getting crazy. My Fable review said literally jaw dropped, speechless, oh my god, because I had no words, jaw dropped, speechless. When I was reading it, I thought the beginning was, I don't want to say slow, but like slower than I wanted. But looking back, it actually was perfect. It like set you up to be attached to the characters and like really get to know them, and then when things started going crazy, like you were super invested. The second half of the book was just so crazy. The ending was not at all what I was expecting, and then you think it's done and then something else happened in a way that was good, because A Killing Cold, I think that was my February book of the month, that just kept having, like, it was like, oh, it's done, and then it kept going, and then it was like, oh, it's done, and then, like, things just kept happening. But with this, it was, like, really well done, and it was only, like, 1 or 2, like, where you think, oh, the ending's done, and then it wasn't. Overall, I really, really liked this book. I read it so fast. I think I read it in, like, a day or 2. Highly, highly recommend. Okay, so next up was Count My Lies by Sophie Stava. This was my March book of the month book. I gave it 3.5 stars. When I first started reading this book, I read about 10 pages, and then I had to put the book down because every single word that came out of this main character's mouth was a lie. Obviously, it's called Count My Lies, but I couldn't handle it. I thought I was gonna not be able to read the book because the amount of lying was driving me crazy. But then I picked it back up and I kept going, and I'm really glad that I did. So the main character's name is Salone, and coming from Iron Flame, that was a bit confusing, but not too bad. But then they introduced another character, and her name is Violet, and so I was like, oh my god. But I got over that really. So the book, main character, Sloane is a pathological liar, and she lies because she thinks that her life is super boring, and so she wants to make it more interesting. So like almost every word that comes out of this girl's mouth is a lie, except she claims that she never lies to her mother. So the book starts with Sloane is in a park, and she sees a little girl get stung by a bee, and the little girl has a really hot dad, and so she goes to help, but she says she's a nurse, and she is not at all even a little bit a nurse. But she helps this little girl get the bee stinger out, and she's talking to the dad, and then she meets the wife, and they invite her over and ask her to be their nanny because they think she's a nurse. They also don't know her name is Sloane. They think it's something else. What I thought was super interesting about it is like the way she justifies her lies. There was a point where I like almost could feel for her, but then I just was like, no, she's lying. If she stopped lying, things would not be this crazy, would not be this bad for her. Like, if she just told the truth. So as the book goes on, you find out just even more and more how crazy Sloane is, and how obsessive and crazy and just like out of her mind. And did I say crazy? She is. And then halfway through the book, you get we switch over to Violet's POV. Violet is the little girl's mom. That's just completely mind-boggling. Like, the things that Violet says and knows and does, just so unexpected, was not at all what I thought Violet's POV would be like. And then the ending, just, I can't tell if I like it or hate it. Like, it just was so out there that I still think about it, which is probably the goal, so that's a good ending, I'd say. Things just kept happening and decisions were made, and I was like really questioning those choices. But again, I'm still thinking about it, so that's a good ending. Overall, I don't think this is my favorite book of the month book that I've picked, but it definitely was the craziest. Even crazier than A Killing Cold, and that one was a little bit out there. So while I was reading Count My Lies and the next book, I was also reading Onyx Storm. I didn't read all of these books in between Iron Flame and Onyx Storm, but I didn't finish Onyx Storm until pretty late in the month. That brings us to our next book, Old Enough by Haley Jacobson. I don't even know how to talk about this book. I annotated. I put tabs in, and I never do that in books. Like, I just was reading and I had to stop because there were so many quotes and things that I wanted to remember, mark down, whatever, that I had to get some sticky notes and start putting tabs in the book. I've only ever done this once, and that was when I read a book intentionally to annotate it, so this was new for me. I gave this 5 stars. This is the easiest 5-star ever. Nothing I say though will really do this book justice. Like, the way Haley Jacobson writes things and describes things and has her characters set up, like everything about it, like I just can't, nothing I say will do it justice. If you look on Goodreads, like the bold like one-liner that it gives for books to describe them just doesn't even begin to do justice. It says, a young bisexual woman who is pulled between a new sense of community and loyalty to a friendship she's outgrown. And that like just barely scratches the surface of what this book is. She just perfectly captured what it's like to be figuring yourself out and dealing with like trauma and just all of that while like being in your early 20s. Like, it just, if you read the back of this book and you even remotely relate to Savannah, the main character, I highly recommend reading this. I just don't have the words to describe this book and what it is and what it means. I think this is a really important book, and you should definitely check it out. So if this book didn't leave me emotionally wrecked enough, I decided to read They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This book has been on my TBR for so long. A couple months ago when I was trying to start a book club with my friends to read banned books, I went through so many banned books lists and picked out books that I wanted to read because like I felt like I should, like Animal Farm, which I'm really glad that I did. Also on that list I have like 1984 and Brave New World. So those are on that list, but then there's books like They Both Die at the End that are more modern, that are banned, that I really want to read. I wanted to read this one for so long, and Brady showed me a banned books table at Barnes & Noble, which did not have this book on it, but then I went and I found it, and so finally I read it, and it just kept hurting. This was such a good book. I gave it 4.5 stars. The title is They Both Die at the End, and they knew that they both were gonna die, but it just like absolutely wrecked me, the ending. I literally was sobbing, had to take a break, couldn't even start another book that day. I had to wait until the next day to start a new book. Basically the premise of this book is you have 2 POVs. You have Mateo and Rufus, and they both get calls from Deathcast saying that they're gonna die today. Deathcast predicts when people are gonna die, and they'll call them between like midnight and 3 a.m. I think was the time frame, and let them know that they're gonna die. It won't tell you how you're gonna die or when that day you're gonna die, but if you get the call, like that is your last day alive. So there's this app called Last Friend, and it's essentially like Tinder but for friends and for people who are gonna die that day. So Rufus and Mateo met on Last Friend, and they were each other's last friend, so they met up, and their personalities were just so different, and they could have easily hated each other because like one of them was super like nervous and unsure about everything and like didn't like to leave his like apartment, and the other one was super outgoing, and they could have easily hated each other, but instead they like perfectly balanced each other out, and like Rufus helped Mateo live, and Mateo helped Rufus like be happy for like the last day, watching their story and their last day unfold, and like them learning about each other and them learning things about themselves. Each chapter like gives like a timestamp of the day, so as the day is going on, as you're getting further and further into the book, you know they're gonna die, but you don't know how, and like you don't know who's gonna die first, and just like I don't know, I think the anticipation of like knowing that they both are gonna die at the end made it even worse. Maybe there was a chance that they lived and the death cast was wrong, but also like you just kind of knew that there wasn't. And then the ending was so well done. Like I would change nothing about the ending except for the fact that it absolutely like broke my heart. I went into the other room to find Brady because I was crying so much about the ending of this book. I so highly recommend this book, whether you're looking to expand the banned books you've read or just looking for a book that will absolutely shatter your heart. Read this. This is the book. This will do it. If you want to cry, here you go. And then I finally finished Onyx Storm, and I gave it 2.75 stars. It was such a force for me to read this book. I had it on Kindle and as an audiobook, and I didn't even like want to listen to it half the time. Like, I was driving, I had an hour-long drive, and I put it on, and I almost switched to music halfway through because I just like, I did not care. I could not make myself care even a little bit about the book, about the plot, about the characters. I simply could not care. Violet was annoying me so much more. She's supposed to be super, super smart, like the brain of a scribe, while also being a writer, but this girl didn't ask a single question about anything. She accepted every single thing at face value and was like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. No, it doesn't make sense. Go ask questions. Like, think. Like, do something. The ending of Onyx Storm, however, was kind of crazy. I am loving all of the theory videos that I'm getting. I don't have really any of my own theories. It's kind of like, I can't solve the Taylor Swift Easter egg. I don't remember enough details about, like, little details about the book to come up with all these crazy theories, but some of them are so wild and make so much sense, and I kind of hope are what happened. So I think I've been enjoying, now that I have read the book, enjoying seeing all the theories and hearing people's opinions and what other people think about the book, and being able to like understand the stuff like that. But at what cost was it worth reading the book? I am gonna read the next book whenever that comes out, because I am really curious to see like what theories are true, and like that cliffhanger that this book ended on was so much better than the Iron Flame ending. But overall, like, it was so much harder to get myself to read this book than it was to get myself to read Iron Flame. I think it took me 2 weeks to read this book, and I usually read a book in like a couple days. I know Onyx Storm is a bit longer, but anything more than a week was just kind of crazy, especially where I had it on Kindle and on Audible. So like, I could have been listening and reading this book nonstop all the time, and I just simply did not care enough. I cared so much more about any of the other books that I was reading. And the only reason I did read other books while reading Onyx Storm was because I was worried that if I didn't, that Onyx Storm would put me into a slump. So I know so many people love this book, and I don't understand it. I don't understand the hype. I really don't. Fourth Wing, so good. I totally understand all the Fourth Wing hype. Yeah, like, you definitely can like point out like different like plot holes or character things that are just like not the best, but I loved Fourth Wing so much. I don't get the Onyx Storm hype at all. I'll excuse Iron Flame being not the best. I feel like I have a lot of beef with second books in series because I think they usually are my least favorite. Like, even Harry Potter, which I love Harry Potter, I don't like book 2. So I think me and book 2 in a series just don't get along. But usually by book 3 I like the series again. The last like 50 pages of Onyx Storm, great, but the other like 500, not so much. So then I read Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I really liked Anxious People by him, and I keep seeing people reading Beartown and saying a lot of good things, and I also know it's about like a hockey town, and I really like hockey, so I thought this would be a good book to read. Before I get into my thoughts and feelings about this book, there should have been a trigger warning at the start. Maybe if I had looked online I would have seen that, but also you shouldn't have to look online before you read a book to check if there's like massive triggers in it. The back of the book, it does say a violent act that will leave a young girl traumatized, so I guess if you really stop and think about that for a second, like, you can assume what that is, but I think that there should have been a trigger warning before the first chapter because I was really caught off guard. Here's your trigger warning if you want to read this book. There is essay in it. So now my thoughts about the book. I gave it 4 stars. I really like Fredrik Backman's writing style. I love how he makes the characters feel really distant, but also you care a lot about them at the same time. It just, like, when I'm reading his books, I feel like a little bit removed from the situation instead of like fully like diving into whatever story is happening. Like, they both die at the end. I felt like I was right there with Rufus and Mateo. Like, I was Rufus and Mateo when, depending on whose like perspective I was reading. But with this book, like, you don't feel that same, like, you are in the story, or at least I didn't, but I enjoyed it because the characters are at a distance, but also you still care. Something he does with how he's writing, at least in this book, like, you see like the break here, this is one perspective and then a new perspective, and you also get that over here too, a different break, so it changes perspectives, but it's all written in the third person, so it's a little bit like they're not like new chapters and you don't get like whose POV you're reading. So there was a couple times where I was kind of confused as to whose perspective I was in, but most of the time it starts like this says like Anna is standing, Peter drives, when the car has gone Anna, and then so like within the first couple words you kind of get the person's name of who you're seeing the story from their perspective with. In the beginning, it was a little confusing because there was a lot of characters and I wasn't really sure who the main characters were. Like, I knew the general gist of this book was that Beartown is a hockey town, and hockey town, like, the hockey game, the semifinals that's coming up is going to, like, be make or break for this town, just, like, for their economy, for all the people who live there, just, like, everything in this town revolves around hockey, and that's about all that I knew, and I knew that the ending had a lot of people crying, and that was all I knew going into this book, so I wasn't sure who the main characters were, but you kind of figure it out pretty quickly, and then sometimes you get the perspective of a side character, but it's not as essential to know, like, every single detail about their life. I also like that he gave the characters, like, real, like, flaws or dilemmas that, like, I couldn't tell. There were certain characters that I couldn't tell if I loved or hated them, but the things I didn't like that they were doing or the decisions that they were making or the timeline that they were working on, it was like, well, if this was a real person, like, I don't know if I could fault them for these things, but as a character, like, so it kind of was just, like, a interesting, like, I really had to think about who I liked and didn't like, whereas, like, in Fourth Wing, you know who the good guys are and you know who the bad guys are, and sometimes there's a twist and a good guy is a bad guy, or a bad guy is a good guy, and, like, but for the, like, most part, like, you're like, yep, like these people, dislike these people, and there were some obvious ones in this book, too, of, like, yeah, we hate this person, we like this person, but then there were a couple who were like, no, they're stuck in a really hard situation, there's no way to, like, know exactly, like, what the correct thing to do is, like, you hear their dilemmas and see their dilemmas and, like, what they're thinking, and so I thought it was really well written, that in a way that, like, makes you think about the characters and think about what they're doing and what the right thing to do is, and I think this is really well written. I don't know if I'll read the next book. The ending of this didn't feel like it set up for a next book, and I haven't looked at what the summary is for the next book. I do like Fredrik Backman's writing, and so I think I would be interested in continuing reading some of his books. And then the last book I read this month, I'm doing a Hunger Games reread. I have yet to read Sunrise on the Reaping, because my Barnes & Noble does not have it in stock, and neither does my local, like, no one has it in stock. I do have it on Audible because my friend had it, and so I was able to download hers. I think I want to physically read the book. I don't think I want to just listen to it. So for now, we're doing a Hunger Games reread. I finished the first book, and 4.5 stars. I am not one to reread books. I've only reread Daisy Jones and the Six, and that was when I reread it to annotate it for my brother's girlfriend. As I was rereading it, like, I enjoyed it, but I was kind of, like, ready to get to the end. I was kind of over it, but I was really enjoying rereading the first book, and there were things that, like I've seen the movies a lot more recently than I read the books. I read the books when, like, back in, like, what, middle school, elementary school, like, when they were first popular. I don't even know when that was. Oh my god, The Hunger Games came out in 2008, so I haven't read the books since I first read them. I've never reread them. I've wanted to reread them, but I just never have. But I've seen the movies, like, multiple times, and definitely way more recently than I read the books. So it was fun to see some of the stuff that the movies had missed, but then also some of the things that the movies did really well. Okay, so I really thought that maybe when I reread the book that Rue wouldn't die, like, maybe that, like, it just changed somehow. I don't know. I thought maybe she'd live and something would be different, and maybe I just misremembered the traumatic event that is Rue dying. But no, sadly Rue still died, and I still cried a lot about it, as if I didn't know it was coming. But in the book, Katniss gets bread sent to her that's, like, the District 11 bread, and she, like, thanks District 11 out loud because she is just pretty sure the cameras are on her. So they didn't include that in the movies, and I really, really, really wish that they did, because that made me cry even harder. Yeah, I really don't have, like, a ton to say, because, like, everyone knows The Hunger Games, but I am glad I'm doing the reread. And then after I read Sunrise on the Reaping, maybe I'll reread Divergent, because I bought really pretty versions of the Divergent series, and then I never reread them. My favorite book of March was definitely Old Enough by Haley Jacobson. I'll have Ren pick his favorite book in a second, but my current reads are Catching Fire, and I think I'm gonna start Murder Your Employer by Rupert Holmes. Funny murder book. I've been taking that book with me to, like, work and stuff for a while. I just haven't started it yet, so I think we'll start that. And here's Ren's favorite book. Can you pick one? Which one do you like? Like The Hunger Games? They both died at the end. That's a good choice. Can I have it? This is Ren's favorite book. Thanks, bud.